shut.
Let's dive into 10 scary 80s horror movies that broke people mentally. Disturbing, relentless, and burned into memory, these films pushed boundaries and sanity. Number 10, Door. Yasuko Honda, a harried housewife balancing a cluttered apartment, a demanding child, and an emotionally distant husband, begins receiving disturbing phone calls from an insistent salesman. When she slams the door on him, crushing his hand, a cascade of psychological terror follows as the visitor evolves from annoying to unstoppable, invading her sanctuary via increasingly twisted methods. The front door becomes a battleground, the thin line protecting her family's safety and privacy fraying with each relentless knock and taunting message. Through tight framing and contrasting open exteriors with claustrophobic interiors, the film draws you into Yasuko's anxious world, where every creak and shadow is potential threat. Number 9, The Gate.
You got demons.
When suburban siblings Glenn and his older sister Al are left home alone for the weekend, Glenn and his friend Terry dare each other to explore a freshly dug hole in the backyard, and in a lapse of youthful curiosity unleash far more than they bargained for. The ground becomes a jagged doorway to nightmares, spewing pint-sized demons that toy with reality, levitate partygoers, and tear away the edges of their safe world. As the creatures multiply, the trio scrambles to seal the breach using heavy metal incantations and a battered Bible, while figures they trust transform into grotesque parodies of themselves. The Gate turns suburban comfort into surreal menace, offering a fairy tale turned nightmare that's as relentless as it is imaginative. Number 8, Demons.
Yes, the demons are coming, and they're coming for you.
A mysterious masked stranger hands out free tickets to a midnight screening at the Metropole Cinema, luring a handful of curious patrons deep into darkness. But once the film begins, the theater becomes a blood-soaked cage. Attendees are transformed by a cursed mask into ravenous demons, and the horde spreads with terrifying speed, feeding on flesh and fear. Panic erupts as the audience desperately attempts to escape amid walls that won't yield, flickering projectors and bodies writhing in grotesque convulsions. The once inviting cinema is warped into a nightmarish labyrinth where every familiar face could be the next threat, and survival rests on desperation, makeshift weapons, and sheer will. Number 7, From Beyond.
It's running itself!
Deep in the confines of a laboratory, a fringe scientist unleashes a machine called the Resonator that stimulates the pineal gland, revealing creatures lurking just beyond the surface of reality. Dr. Crawford Tillinghast's curiosity turns dark when these unseen beings strike back, decapitating his mentor in grotesque silence and ensnaring his mind in splintered madness. Confined to a psychiatric ward, Tillinghast becomes the catalyst for a new expedition led by a determined psychiatrist and a skeptical detective who return to confront horrors that warp flesh and fracture sanity. The laboratory's sterile corridors erupt with writhing slime, pulsating tentacles and mutated forms that blur the boundary between science and nightmare. Number 6, Pin.
Is Pin a friend or an enemy?
Hello, Marshall.
Leon and his sister Ursula are raised in a forbidding household by a distant doctor father who uses a life-sized anatomical dummy named Pin as a ventriloquist tool to teach them bodily functions with unsettling detachment. Leon, emotionally starved and isolated, begins to perceive Pin not as an inanimate object but as a confidant, and perhaps more, blurring his grip on reality. As the siblings age, Leon descends further into obsession, isolated by trauma and compulsion, while Ursula attempts to break away, sparking a spiral of psychological unrest that explodes into violence. Pin is a disturbing portrait of mental fracture, where coping mechanisms warp into a nightmare so subtle you almost don't see it coming. Number 5, Dark Night of the Scarecrow. In a rural southern town, gentle-minded Bubba Ritter, cherished by young Marilee yet misunderstood by locals, becomes the target of suspicion when tragedy strikes. A mob led by the vengeful postal worker Otis Hazelrig frames Bubba and disguises him as a scarecrow before ruthlessly gunning him down. Though the vigilantes are acquitted, a silent retribution begins. Strange accidents plague those responsible, escalating into a haunting force that stalks them one by one. As tension mounts, the line between ghostly vengeance and psychological terror blurs, and the tight-knit community spirals into fear. The film subverts slasher cliches with quiet dread and moral reckoning. Number 4, Christine. Arnie Cunningham, a meek high school nerd, stumbles upon a battered 1958 Plymouth Fury at a local junkyard, and something about the car calls to him. As he restores the gleaming red and white beauty, he blossoms. Confidence replacing insecurity, charisma replacing awkwardness. But the transformation runs deeper than appearance. Christine, the car, seems to have a mind and will of her own. It drives Arnie to obsessive loyalty, isolates him from friends and family, and punishes anyone who threatens their bond with violent, supernatural retribution. The chrome, the engine, and a vintage rock and roll soundtrack fuse into something both nostalgic and unnervingly alive. Directed by John Carpenter, the film is a haunting fusion of adolescent metamorphosis and vehicular possession. Number 3, Near Dark.
I gotta do this for you. Ah! Mr. Big Knuckle.
Caleb Colton, a small-town farmer's son in Oklahoma, meets the alluring drifter May at a roadside bar and is drawn in by more than her smile when she bites him with dangerous affection. As daylight burns him in the modulated reflection of howls and longing, Caleb is swept into May's nomadic family of vampires, disaffected outsiders haunting towns from the back roads southward. May's devotion protects him from the savage Severin and the brooding leader Jesse, but Caleb's reluctance to kill fractures their fragile bond, igniting loyalty, bloodlust, and a desperate reckoning. His family seeks him in the asphalt twilight, moving through thrills and gunfire as Caleb teeters between human love and immortal desire. Number 2, Hellraiser.
Nightmare.
No.
Unlike anything you have witnessed.
Larry Cotton unwittingly unleashes a horror beyond comprehension when he unlocks a mysterious puzzle box, summoning the Cenobites, extra-dimensional beings whose idea of pleasure and pain are disturbingly intertwined. Returning to life through his wife Julia's gruesome help, Frank Cotton roams the shadows, his flesh skeletal and his hunger unquenchable, as Julia lures unsuspecting victims to rebuild him piece by piece. When Larry's defiant daughter Kirsty discovers the truth, she turns to the box's secrets to bargain for survival, just as the Cenobites close in. Drawn by her desperate ingenuity and moral resolve. Directed by Clive Barker, the film is a nightmarish prayer to curiosity's darkest corners, where salvation and damnation converge. Number 1, Angst. A nameless psychopath, freshly released from prison after serving time for murder, slips away under the radar of rehabilitation and re-enters society with a simple motive: reignite his spree of fear. In a visceral descent into depravity, he breaks into a secluded home, targeting a mother, her wheelchair-bound son, and her daughter with clinical detachment. As the carnage unfolds in eerie real time, the killer's chilling voiceover sketches a childhood of twisted memories, abandonment, and growing compulsion. The house's sleek corridors and stark rooms mirror his fractured psyche, each movement punctuated by the unsettling stillness of suburban normalcy turned grotesque. Every frame pushes into the mind of evil, stripping away sympathy and leaving only revulsion. Here are 4 other movies you have to see. The Funhouse. A group of teens sneaks into a carnival's funhouse overnight for thrills, only to witness a murder by a deformed carnival worker. When the killer's twisted family discovers them, the friends are stalked through a maze of nightmares. The carnival's grotesque attractions become their final trial of survival. Should. Homeless people begin vanishing in New York, prompting a photographer and a police captain to uncover a conspiracy beneath the city. Mutated, cannibalistic creatures, born of toxic waste and government secrecy, lurk in the sewers, dragging victims into the darkness. terror train. College students board a train for a New Year's Eve costume party, unaware that one of them is a killer seeking revenge for a cruel prank years prior. As the train barrels through snowy isolation, the killer strikes behind masks and illusions, a slasher that rides a claustrophobic track of guilt and vengeance. Invaders from Mars. A young boy sees a glowing spacecraft land behind his house, but no one believes him, especially when adults begin acting strangely. As townsfolk fall under alien control, the boy teams up with the school nurse to expose the silent invasion, a paranoid remake with chilling practical effects and a child's eye view of alien horror.